Good morning. Conclusion of Hemshech Haim Beis through the lens of the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, Nik Hashem Elokeinu, page 386. So we learned all of this has been quite heavy, but especially this last paragraph that began on bottom of page 384, where the Mittler Rebbe asked the question, what is this pasuk coming to be Sheilo? Ma bo lishol bezeh, when we say Havaya Lekenu. And most likely he means the words Havaya Lekenu, not necessarily Havaya Echad as well, even though it's all part of the picture. When we know already that it says Ein Eid Milvadeh. V'lo tzarich liyichud zeh b'Yisrael dafke. B'chol yom v'yom. Why this yichud is dafke b'Yisrael with Jews, through Yisrael, neshamas Yisrael. So briefly, the answer is, summing up what we learned, was that the whole purpose of existence and creation is neshamas Yisrael, who are rooted in the highest of levels in ma'ala b'machshava, meaning in the original primordial thought of God. When he planned existence, it didn't begin with the building and structure of existence. Bereishis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'aretz. Bereishis b'shvil haTorah, b'shvil Yisrael. Though he doesn't mention Yisrael, but he says it clearly, because they are the purpose of it all. But the purpose doesn't remain in the highest worlds. It comes down. The point is that the neshama should come down into this world. He said, in tachtenim, in bodies, in a very structured existence like ours, through the tzimtzum and the parsa and everything that is required in building this existence, and they should manifest and reveal in tachtenim that it's really the yichud with the highest levels of the divine. And that's the kavanah. That's the ultimate purpose. To mevara the klippas nega of the nefesh habamis, and in this dark world to transform the darkness to light. But not just transform it, but to reveal the Havaya Elokeinu, that Havaya of the highest level, which manifests Atzmus Ein Sof, through the Torah mitzvahs of Neshamas Yisrael, that Gilei Lekush should come down, beli Helam and beli Shinui. In other words, exactly as it is above, that's how we should have the Yichud below. So in Ishtalshalus, there's a distinction between Havaya and Elokim. Havaya is Gilui and Elokim is Tzimtzum, or Havaya is Chesed and Elokim is Gevurah. But in Torah mitzvahs and Neshamas Yisrael, they come together, kul echad, and the parsa does not conceal at all. And that's what unifies Das Elyon and Das Tachten, Yechudi Lo, Yechudi Tata, Bli Shinui Klal, Nitvas Be'ena Nitvas, as he put it. God is contained in it, but he's not contained by it. Beside the pnimius of Havaya Elokim, Havaya Elokeinu, Torah mitzvahs and Neshamas Yisrael. Then on top of page 386, he brought, this is the Gili Shechina and the Heichel of Kodesh Kodashim. So though the heavens of heavens cannot contain the Eibishter, but by Hazeh, yes, the Mahus V'Atzmus does manifest in the Beis Hamikdash in a way of Makam Ha'aron Eina Min Hamida, Nitfus and Eina Nitfus. So there's space, but it's not defined by the space. Then he added, Ach b'Torah mitzvahs, Nitfus mamish. And I stopped and paused at that line. What is this? What is this qualification here? Clearly, he's making a distinction by saying Nitfus mamish is distinguishing between saying Nitfus and Eina Nitfus. So is he actually saying that when it comes to Torah mitzvahs and also Neshamas Yisrael, obviously that it's mamish Nitfus and there's no element of not Nitfus, as I asked yesterday? That's what it sounds like. That's what means nitfus mamish. What else would he be negating? In other words, in existence, it's nitfus and ain't nitfus. And that's what Neshamas Yisrael through Torah Mitzvahs reveal the yichud of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that even in the very existence, on its own, Havai Elokeinu are not joined as one. But through the yichud of Neshamas Yisrael, Torah Mitzvahs, we reveal that it's all of existence is Havai Elokeinu, internalized. Havai Elokeinu internalized within existence. But the Neshamas Yisrael themselves, the Torah Mitzvahs themselves, they are even a higher level because their Atzmus is nitfis in them. He doesn't elaborate what that means. He just says these words, Ach b'Torah Mitzvahs nitfis mamish, and enters into another zone here, which is the discussion of the Yesh Amiti and the Yesh Nivra. And this is where I was, I would say, stuck, but to be very honest, and not clear to me from this Maimer itself. I do have clarity from other Maimerim, but I didn't want to bring them into this because I don't want to confuse matters. There's a Maimer Buri Azeir, the whole concept of Yesh Amiti, Yesh Nivra, which I'm going to discuss now, is a big theme, especially in the Rebbe Sichos. And he bases it on Ager Sarkeder Simon Chof and Buri Azeir Vayishlach. And here I see he's bringing it as well. So it could be we need to depend on and rely on that explanation to understand this. But I didn't want to go there. As I said, I try to first learn this mimer without processing it and comparing it to other places. But I will first spell out what I think is still, to me, is unclear at least. So fine, everything till here, very good. The world is created by God through a tzimtzum and a parsa. And beside the shtalshlis, there's das tachten, there's das elyon, yichud dato, yichud alo, all the levels. Mamalak, like he says, ishtalshlis, mamalak kalam, the save of kalam, fine. Then comes Neshamas Yisrael ascent into this world, like Adam and Chava created in the sixth day of creation. Creation itself, for the 6 days until the human being arrives, is all the structure of Seder Ishtalshlis. Everything is with gradations. Milo Mata, you can't say Yichud. Obviously, from Atzmus' point of view, everything is united, but the world is not yet experiencing that form of utter seamless unity with God. That's the purpose of a neshama. So God sent neshamas to the world to make a dira b'tachtenim. That's what it means. Before the neshamas come to the world, there's no dira b'tachtenim, even though ikar shchina b'tachtenim esa. So there's an element of the divine, but it's not the full experience. Like we learned earlier in volume 3 in Ayin Beis, God put Adam and Chava into the garden, and the garden had trees already. But what does a good gardener do? They make the trees blossom and thrive, and make it grow in more abundance. That's what La'avda L'Shamra, the purpose of creation is, that we don't just take the world as it is, Ashabara L'kim Lasis L'Sakin, to make it even a better world, meaning a world completely saturated with Atzmus. That's dependent on the Neshamas Yisrael. Like we said, Yisrael is rooted in Olah b'Machshava. The building is like the palace. The king built a palace for his children. But it's the children that make the palace into a living environment. They make it into a mishkan. That was not done naturally. That's through the work of a person. So bottom line is the neshamas now come in and they create yichud in this world. They take all of existence, like the Medrash says, that what did Adam do on the first Rosh Hashanah, the first Friday when he was created? He called and summoned the whole world and said, come, let us all crown God as king and let us bow and prostrate ourselves and accepting the divine. What we do Rosh Hashanah, we call not just upon ourselves, but the entire world to accept God's sovereignty, which is another way of saying, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Yisrael, listen, we're pronouncing God's unity, not just in words, but in experience, in life, that everything is about godliness. Fine. So that would tell us there's two steps. There's Ishtalshlus on its own, and there's the Avedis Adam, which is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Good. And now we're introducing not just levels of Yichud, but all the way to the highest level, that Yichud Tata and Yichud Ilah, one das tacht nasalin. Why? Because neshamas access the highest level of how God sees it, and from God's point of view, das tacht is just like das elyon, as we learned at length. So that needs it needs a lot more discussion and personalizing. We said applying it to our lives, no doubt. But the concept is pretty much, that's the thing. But now he adds this in Teda Mitzvahs Nitves Mamish and starts going into the Yesh Amiti, Yesh Nivra. So this, initially, what is he adding here? What is this addition here? Now, this is where, here are my questions. But first before I ask the question, I want to just sum up what we learned, and then I'll spell out what to me is still unclear. And I'm saying it not in order to confuse, but on the contrary, that once we spell out what exactly is unclear, we could perhaps get that clarity either from here or from other places. So what does he say now? And he says like it'll be la'ilam haba. In other words, he's introducing now what the future of the world will look like when everything is finished. When I say finished, obviously the job never ends. We spoke Ein Sof, it's a constant journey, but I mean getting over, eliminating the concealment that was created in the beginning of creation, the Elokim, the Tzimtzum, that we have overcome and we've transformed into Oir, which is essentially what we've been doing all the thousands of years of Aveda, but Osad Love, it'll finally be permanent. The world will be saturated with godliness and with divine unity. So now he's bringing us to that. So what's that ultimate world going to look like? So he says, the yesh amiti k'moishahu sheyove b'pchinas kelim the neshamis Yisrael begufim b'tchius hamesing b'elam habashu gamkem b'pchinas yesh. In other words, that the neshamis Yisrael down here below, kelim, he mentioned that before as well when he spoke about Pnimi Elokeinu, Hashem Elokeinu, that we will in this world be kelim to mamish the yesh hanivra will be like one with the yesh amiti. And he makes it clear without yesh mi yesh mamish. It's a pretty strong word. The dilug. So the nishtalshlus, forget from the yesh amiti to the yesh nivri, you need two levels of ayin, as we learned. Das elyon, das tachten. The ayin of the yesh amiti, the as it's revealed to himself, just beyond existence. The ayin of the Yesh HaNivra, the of the divine that relates to existence. Mamalik, Sevav Kalam, Mamalik Kalam. And that's how that ayin speaks to the Yesh. Dasara Mamoris Nivra Elam, God speaking, Yehi Yehi Rakia. But once the Aveda is done, and the Shamas Yisrael themselves, Elam Haba in the future, he says, we'll skip those. The Ma'ayin Yeshabah, that will come to a point, Belima Mutzer Klal. Exactly as it is, the Yesh Amiti, that's all being the Yesh HaNivra. And not Ha'arav Ziv at all. It won't be a reflection. Ayin, as we learned, is a reflection. Even the highest levels of Oyer, at the end of the day, it's only a reflection. That's why there's an infinite distance and nothing commensurate between the Yesh and the Ayin, like we learned. But here it's going to be Meskabel b'Mekablim Shem Teda Mitzvahs b'Neshamas Yisrael. I'm being medayik. I'm very much really focusing exact words. He says the word Teda Mitzvahs b'Neshamas Yisrael sheba Elam Haba b'Chinas Yesh Gomer v'Lo Yeh b'Chinas Pirud Klal Klal. So this sounds very, very similar to what we learned earlier, that when you reach the perspective of Atzmus, there's no two things. There's no two levels of ayin. Das elyon, das tachten, all are one. When I say one, there are two because God wanted two levels, but I mean to say their bittul and their yichud is utterly seamless and utterly equal because God wanted both once you reach that level. So that's what it sounds like he's saying here. Shezeu havaya l'keinu mamish, gam, that's havaya l'keinu mamish. But gam ato, now he says that this also is accessible to us now. That's why we don't say Shema, only losid love it. If this indeed is the fact that this level can only be achieved in the future, why are we saying Shema Yisrael every day? Like he said, every day we're miyachid through Shema Yisrael. So he's saying, okay, so Avayal Kein Imam is Gam Ata, Lakshu Behelim Belavush. The thing is that today it's concealed. So this is not talking about the concealment of the usual concealment of Avayal Kim of Ishtalshus. He's saying even the Yesh Amiti, Yesh Nivra aspect that exists fundamentally is still concealed. So this shouldn't be confused with the concealment of ishtalshus. So it's concealed, the levush, the Torah mitzvahs, in the levush of Torah mitzvahs, which also needs to understand what that means. Because before he said Torah mitzvahs, manifest this. But obviously in Torah mitzvahs, we don't see it completely. We, not from the Atzmus point of view, we. Ubi yichud de'elah b'krishma, ba'amri havaya lekeinu havaya echad. So that's another. What does this mean? The levush of yichud de'elah, not sure what that means. If he said the levush of yichud tata, or yichud de'elah and yichud tata, not so clear to me what he means by that as well. But he does say that. The mesamzeh yesh b'yicholtam liyachid yichud elya. But since we have access to it, it's not concealed. It's not like Asad Love, it will be fully revealed. Today it's concealed. But since we have access, mitamzeh, that's why Neshamas Yisrael have the power liyachid yichud elyon hazeh shalamayla min ishtalshlus of seva v'mala ba'omrim havaya lekeinu dafka shabli amtzoi, by saying havaya lekeinu without an amtzoi, because havaya lekeinu exactly as it is above, that's how it comes below. The yesh amiti, like he said, al kein havaya zeh echad ba'achdus pshuta gam ata. So we say Hashem lekeinu Hashem echad. Well, it's also that way now, and that's our work. That's why we have the capacity. The fulfillment, the realization of it will be la'asad love. But the work we're doing now is not just on a lower level. We're drawing down these highest levels of Agdus Pshuta. And that's what we say, Alufa Shalelim, She'ena Elam Mekeme Klal. So, Aleph of Echad is Alufa Shalelim, master of the universe. The world does not contain him. And this is what they didn't do. Neshamas Yisrael, Tam Lechud, the Tolib, and Neshamas Yisrael, Aydei Teir and Mitzvahs. Sheyamshichu ma'era Atzmus mamish de'ein sham hester v'helam klal. So they're drawing from Atzmus where there's no concealment at all. V'yeh achdus pshuta lamata or echad pashat lamata kamei lamayla bli shinei klal. And that's what means Shema Yisrael dafke havaya lekeinu dafke havaya echad pashat. Which comes to answer the two questions that he asked at the beginning of the paragraph. Number one, what is the havaya lekeinu adding? So what's adding over Eined Movade is apparently that you have that the Havaya Lekenu, that you have not two levels. Of Eined Movade, you could say there's nothing but God. But we don't know this higher level of the third level of Yichud here, that Havaya Lekenu, which is that we come to a point that it's like one in Shamas Yisrael and Torah mitzvahs. That's Dafkin Shema. Eined Movade is telling us in general, the world, obviously, is completely godliness. Here we're talking about the Havaya Lekenu part connected to Yisrael, and that's why also he says Yisrael, the second question be Yisrael. Which tells me that when he said, Ach, b'teira mitzvahs nitvas mamish, that's taka what he's saying. The way you experience Eined Movade in the world is, like we talked about, yes, every stone and every flower and every fiber of existence is completely godly. But it in itself cannot reveal that. You need Neshamas Yisrael, which are even a higher level, where their Atzmus is mamish nitfas, that achieves and brings that into the world. Because God created the world in the 6 days, there we don't say it's yet this level of Havaya Lekenu. That's Shema Yisrael dafka. It doesn't say the world can experience it without Yisrael. The fact they say Shema Yisrael means Yisrael have something that's unique. And that's the whole point of this paragraph, because that's what he asked in the beginning. So apparently he is saying that there's some higher level in the Yichud itself by the Neshamas, because the Neshamas are the ones that are affecting it. So the simple explanation, and here I am leaning on what the Rebbe says in Chukas Tov Shemem Ches, it's a Sikha, where he brings the Biuri Hazer I mentioned, Mitler Rebbe as well, Yesh Amiti, Yesh Anivri. He says the difference between Yesh Amiti, Yesh Anivri. You know what? Let me read it inside, because I think it's critical here to understand what he's saying here. We learned this, by the way. Let me pull it up. If you may recall, when we finished Ayin Beis, I learned a few texts before we got to Torah the Torah Shalom, and then we learned this text on Tavshim Mem Ches. page, let me open it. Chukas. Yeah, page 520. It was probably posted on the group as well. If you want, I can post it right now again. Make a picture.
That would be great, please.
Yeah, let's do this. 1 second. Here we go. Look at the magic of technology. One little press. There you go. Oh. So you see the long footnote on the second column. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll just read quickly. Actually, I said Vayishlach b'shalach b'yorei hazer. So I'm just reading from, in the Pnim, in the actual text on top, I'm reading column 2. He says, you read this V'golas HaNeshama that comes down in this body. So he says, through the soul coming down below, that nizgala milas haguf, the koyach ha'atzmus that is found in the guf. B'loshen ha'yadua, the yesh ha'nivre is ein zach kav yochel midim yesh ha'amiti. That the yesh ha'nivre is one with the yesh ha'amiti, so to speak. To the point that the neshama will actually receive its chayas from the guf. So I don't want to go into right now. That's a whole other discussion. Okay. Now, in the footnote, he touches upon, so what is yesh amit, yesh aniv? Is they talking about the neshama in the guf, or is they talking about the yesh of the olam hazeh? A stone, a tree, or the general existence. So you see, footnote 41, he quotes the Mittler Rebbe's B'yorei hazer, which is very similar to what it says here, but more at length. So I'm going to read the footnote 42. She says, "She'inyan zeh, this inyan that yesh amit yesh anivra is be'ikar b'negei leguf Yisrael. It's primarily around the body of a Jewish body, meaning dafka body, not every yesh. Kedamashma b'B'yorei hazer sham, like it appears from B'yorei hazer. And frankly, had we known, we would have probably also cited this Maimer we're just reading now in Mittler Rebbe, because he says the same thing here. He says, ach b'teira mitzvahs nitfus mamish. But it's very clear, Shema Yisrael, that's talking about Teira mitzvahs and Neshamas Yisrael. And he tells us to look in the Maimer Tavshin Lamed. Okay, I'm just skipping the Mar Mekamis. Av shebachlolus, the end of the paragraph. I just skipped the sources. I don't want to confuse matters. Av shebachlolus kenu b'gein chala bria. Even though in general, when you say yesh amit, yesh aniv, you're talking about the general bria, not just the guf of Yisrael. Kula. She yesh aniv chadum yesh amiti. And he cites another mimer from the Rebbe Rashab. So then, in the next 2 paragraphs, the Rebbe is going to speak about what's the difference then. When you say yesh anivra, yesh amiti of the existence, and yesh anivra, yesh amiti in Israel. So you could see from this, perhaps an explanation to what he means by saying ach b'teira mitzvahs nitfus mamish. As a matter of fact, the more I'm reading it, the more I see it is an actual explanation for that. So let me read it. Let me read it inside. Continuing the next paragraph in the footnote. Everybody following what I'm doing here? Okay.
Yeah.
So it says like this. Re'ei l'kutis sichis chelikid beis, sending us another sichis Sazriya in volume 12. Again, I'm skipping the actual citations and I mean the numbers. It's not, you can look it up later. Shakavona bezeh, that the kavona in saying that existence is yesh anivra yesh amiti, and then you say Yisrael is shamitis mitziyusei shel yesh anivra de'elam is hu yesh amitihu. That the meaning of yesh amit yesh anivra with existence is that the true reality of existence is really godliness. Exactly like we learned this in the end of Ayin Beis. If you remember, the Hisavus itself, especially when you're talking the highest level, is the true amitis. We don't see it, so therefore we feel like we're yesh nifrad, and we are. We because the tzimtzum and the concealment conceals it. But the true reality is elikus. Sha'atzmus hu hamahava esam, because Atzmus is the one that created them all, meaning all of existence. We're talking about existence now. I think there's a mistake here. It should say mibil adoi. It says mil ba'adoi. Mibil adoi. And without him, ain't shum mitzias klal. That's what it says in Lekachtem Lechem, the mimer of the Rebbe Rashab that he cites at the end of the last paragraph. So in other words, Yesh Hamiti, Yesh Hanivra means that our entire existence is divine, is Elikus. And without Elikus, there's no Mitzias at all. Mashenkin be Yisrael. So Lekutei Sichos, volume 12, he says, the difference is, be Yisrael is another level. Mitziyusam gufahu kavyochel ha'atzmus. It's not that we were created and our entire existence is Atzmus, as in it is the real essence, like saying the real, like for example, saying that the real Messias of water is H2O, is the subatomic particles. I'm just using that as an example. Here we say, no, they're very Messias, their very being is Atzmus. That's a very different statement. The stone is nothing but divine energy and divine Atzmus because Atzmus created it. But to say that it identifies with Atzmus, meaning its identity is an Atzmistic identity, is a whole other story. A stone doesn't represent God. A stone is a creation of God's, and its entire being is only godly energy, only godliness. The highest level, Atzmus within it. But you're saying here in Chelik Beis, Mitzvah Guful Kavyachal Atzmus, which means that their personality of the Neshamas Yisrael is an Atzmistic personality, which you cannot say about creation. Creation, you can't say the personality of creation is Atzmus. You could say it is nothing but the power of Atzmus. That's the distinction he makes there. So in other words, in a way, it's like what I said yesterday. The existence is the structure where Hashem sends his special child, meaning the neshama, to do his job. But you can't compare the home that God built for us and us. We are his child. Bonim atem l'Hashem Elokechem, like he says in chapter 2 in Tanya. Why don't you say that on a stone, on a leaf, on a tree, on a donkey? It's also nothing but divine, because it's a divine creation, meaning it's a creation that is nothing but Atzmus that's giving it power. Whereas a neshama is a piece of Atzmus in the sense, its personality. It's like a son to a father. That's different than the son's home that the father built for him. So now in this sikha, however, he goes further. He says like this, V'ula yashlemer yiseidim mizeh. Perhaps we can say more than this. Shegam yesh hanivra de'elam esu kula chadim yesh hamiti. That when you go deeper, that also the Olamas are completely one with Atzmus. Not just that they're nothing but divine Atzmus energy, but they're kula chadim yesh hamiti. In the footnote, meaning the footnote to the footnote, if you look down the italics below, he says, that's not a contradiction to what it says elsewhere. I'm just going to tell you the summation of it. That God and the Bria cannot be one, like we learned here. Nitfas ve'ena nitfas. We say God created existence, but we're not contained by existence. With Neshamas Yisrael, it appears like he's saying that is also, like he says, nitfas mamish. Like he's also contained by Neshamas Yisrael and by Torah mitzvahs. So you can't say that on the creation. So how do you say that kol echad also on creation? So he says the reason is this idea that God only in Atzilus do you say he's one with the energies and the containers is mitzad giluyim. Giluyim means mitzad the revelations of Elikus, shtalshlus. So there you can distinguish. Aval mitzad Atzmus, gama bria yesh hanivra kula chadim yesh hamiti. Mitzad Atzmus, very, very similar to the words that we're learning in Ayin Beis and the Mitler Rebbe here. Mitzad Atzmus, it's all one. Das Tachton and Das Elyon. And he doesn't make the distinction between the worlds and the Neshamas Yisrael there. So we're not saying the Neshamas Yisrael is the same like existence. It's definitely higher, meaning that unity is talking about existence is unified. But then the Rebbe adds that Tzarachi and Gadol. Tzarachi and Gadol is a rare statement where you need a lot of iyun. It usually means it's complicated, very complicated. Tzarachi is usually means it's still unclear, it still needs answering. Tzarachi and Gadol means a lot of explanation. The Ein Kama Keme. And here's not the place for it. That's what this adds here. So bottom line is, what he's saying is that the world is also kula chad b'tzad Atzmus, but not b'tzad giluyim. B'tzad giluyim, you can't say the world is the same as Atzilus. But if you remember the end of Ayin Beis, and that's why I learned it, he says the Bria is just like Atzilus from that perspective. So it's very similar. Now, I had not learned Ayin Beis, and the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer here, when this Sikha was written, which I had the schus to prepare, had I learned it, I would have definitely referred to it and try to probably elicit from the Rebbe more clarity in this whole topic, but wasn't meant to be. But when I read it now, and I read the Ayin Beis and the Mittler Rebbe, a lot of it meshes together. But we still need to understand the fact that we just said that the Bria is Kol Echad, but then, so what's about Neshamas Yisrael? We're saying Neshamas Yisrael is even higher. Now that you've introduced that, it's not just the creation is created by Atzmus and is Kulei Atzmus Mitzat creation, but you're saying now it's Kol Echad, like what we said before about Neshamas. So what about Neshamas? So there comes the next paragraph and says, Are you back in the
Mittler Rebbe, or are you still in footnote 42?
42. So he continues, Ella Shamiti Sa'in Sheyesha Nivra Amitis Mitzui Hu Yesha Amiti Koyal Yisrael. Even when we just added that the worlds also, Mitzvah Atzmus, have this total unity, but still the Amitis Inyan, the true Inyan of Yesha Amiti Yesha Nivra goes on Yisrael canal. Ki Hashad Nivra B'Shvilam. Because the rest of existence at the end of the day was created for them. Like I said, the house, the structure was created for the Neshamas Yisrael, not the other way around. And here the Rebbe wrote the next line. He added this in his own handwriting. Until this day, I don't have a clear picture what it means. So I'll just share you what he writes. So how do you explain the difference between the Neshamas Yisrael and the world? We just said B'Shvilam. Okay, it's created for them. The Rebbe says, Al derech hachiluk, similar to the difference, the Metzias Evet Kanani, Legaba Adon, the Evet Kanani, a Gentile servant, compared to his master, Umetzias Nechosav, and the existence of his property. This is what the Rebbe added. So there's a lot of explanation needed here. Why Evet Kanani? Why not Evet Ivri? Talking about Neshamas. But he says the difference in Evet Kanani compared to the master and Nechosav. Is Nechosav referring to the Nechosim of the Evet Kanani? Most likely not. It's referring to the property of the Odin. So in other words, the Evet Kanani has some type of connection to the Odin, to the master, different than the property does. I'm not going to explain that right now. I'll leave that for discussion. You can strain yourself with this as I've been doing for the last 30 years. Literally, this is Tov Shem Mem Ches. This was said 36 years ago. I never got to the bottom of this example that the Rebbe gives, but there's clearly very lot of profundity here, and it also mixes Nigla and Chassidus because he's bringing Evet Kanani, Nechosim, Oded. So if anybody wants to weigh in on it, by all means. But I tell you, study it first before you comment.
Which property is he referring to? Which Nechasim?
That's part of the question. That's part of the discussion here. What property is he referring to? The property of the master or the property of the servant? I would say most likely the property of the master.
Of course, the master. Yeah.
Because Kol Masha Kona Evet Kona Rabbi. The Evet Kanani does not have property. So what's the difference between the Evet Kanani and the is it because he's human and the property is not? Anyway, I don't want to analyze it right now. Trust me.
Right, probably. The Neshama is like the Evet Kanani, which is a little bit Not clear because we said the
Right. Why would
neshama
he
is
use
part
Evet
of
Kanani?
Mahusay.
I told you, I've spent, I would say, over 100 hours trying to understand this. So, good luck.
Pashtus Eved is human, and Nechosim both are
I knew you would
Tluim
not, you couldn't resist trying. Go ahead. You have it figured out now?
a little bit. That Eved Knani is human, even though that is also Nechosim, but the attitude that the Odin is having to Eved Knani is different than he is having to a stone, to a building, because he's having more connection to it. My problem
Okay.
is that the neshama is more than that. More than
It's al
Evet
derech.
Knani.
He's only saying al derech. It doesn't have to be mamish the same level. He's giving an example. He wants to compare, to say that if everything is godliness, what is the difference between the godliness within existence and the godliness within the Shamas Yisrael? So that's what you're saying is Bepashta is the explanation, and that's fine. I'm just telling you, it's still not so pashut. It's not. You need to think it through more, even. But fine. Let's suffice with what you just said. I'm fine with that. I don't need to go further than this.
Just to clarify, you've said, and this not you, but the Rebbe, I think, and you too yourself, actually have referred to three questions: whether the alamos are atzma or contain atzmus, whether the neshamas Yisrael could, whether Yesh Hanivra contains atzmus is one with it, or whether neshamas Yisrael are one with atzmus. I mean, you've used
I don't see
things
three
now.
here at all. I don't know what you mean by three. There's Yesh Hanivra, Yesh Hamiti. The question is the Yesh Hanivra referring to Neshamas Yisrael, the body of Yisrael, or the existence?
Right.
And he's saying
exactly.
both. The whole footnote is saying both.
I see. One time you said alamos. I don't know if you slipped or not, but you referred
No,
to all the
Olamus, that's
alamos.
existence.
Yeah,
Olamus is
exactly.
existence.
Yes, Aniva.
Okay, I would suggest not processing right now. I'm going through this. Let's learn it. You'll study it yourself as much as you can. It's not a simple matter. One more paragraph, however. The achilik bein Elam v'Yisrael, and the difference between the world and Israel and Yisrael, be'efen ha'yisagdus im yesh amiti, in the manner that they get connected, united with yesh amiti, ulai ef shalemer. Perhaps we can say like this: Ze gufa sheyesh hanivra chad hu im yesh amiti u'b'koyach ha'atzmus. Shu kol yachol. This itself, that the Yesh HaNivra is one with the Yesh HaMiti, is B'koyach Atzmus. We know that clearly, because B'koyach HaAdam, there's a distinction. We've been learning this all in these Maimorim. So it's B'koyach Atzmus. Shu kol yachol, v'neis ha'ofchim. He's able to contain all these opposites. Aval mitzad HaNivra harihu mitzias hofchis miselikus. But from the point of view of the Nivra, we are the diametric opposite of elikus. Mashenkin b'Yisrael, that's existence. So existence feels that it's koyach ha'atzmus, mitzad koyach ha'atzmus, not mitzad its koyach. Mashenkin b'Yisrael, mitziu usam gufa, gam mitzad b'riyosam, hu kavyachal ha'atzmus. That in some way, their very identity, mitzad b'riyosam, is atzmus itself. So it's not just mitzad kol yochel, something has been internalized. Literally, that would explain what he meant, tfisa mamish. The third line on top of page 386. To explain that, this Ulei of Shlemer comes to explain that. That's why it's nitfis mamish. Means also their very identity. He said that earlier, but earlier he was saying creation is only created by Atzmus. Now he's saying that the creation itself is Atzmus, but it's mitzad Atzmus, not mitzad creation. And the Neshamas Yisrael, there's something in their way they were created, like I said, a son of a parent that has Atzmus itself in it. Now that does not apply most likely to an Eved Kanani, because Eved Kanani doesn't have the very essence of his master. Yes, the master has a different relationship to him than he does to his property, but it doesn't have this element. So it could be the Rebbe there is referring to more the first point, that b'shvilam, that the neshamas is the Evet Kanani serves the master himself. The nechasim are like his chariot, his furniture, his house is not quite as so-called dedicated to him directly. With Evet Kanani is serving the master, and the nechasim are more or accessories. That can be the explanation. Whereas now he's going deeper and saying further that the difference is that one existence does not relate to Atzmus. Even though from Atzmus' point of view, it's one with existence. And the Shamas, in some way, they do relate. And that's the nitfas that he means here in the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer. And with that, we finish the Ha'ara. And hopefully it helps us understand much of what we learned here. But by no means am I suggesting it's easy. I hope this was all helpful. Any questions?
So is he saying, the Rebbe is saying that there's something special about the Jewish neshama, that when you put the Jewish neshama in a goof, you have there the fusion of all the worlds, you have Atzmus itself, whereas let's say Lahabdil, when you put a Goisha neshama, if you will, or nefesh in a body, it still is a reflection of Atzmus, but it because everything is Atzmus, but there's something different about that that's not quite a fusion. It's from Mitzat Atzmus, it is Atzmus, but by the Jewish neshama, we have the potential more than any other people, let's say, to create this fusion, this yichud of yichudim, because there's a Yiddish neshama in the goof. You're taking something from Atzmus and you're placing it into Yesh HaNivra, and there you have a fusion, mamish, like physically, literally, you're putting Yiddish neshama in a goof, and that's what's special about a Yid. That's different than any other creation.
You could say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes to explain Shema, what the question he asked, what's the addition of Shema Yisrael, Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya Echad? Dafki Yisrael, and the meaning of Havaya Elokeinu in this context of total internalizing. By Elokeinu, as Mamish Havaya Echad, one without any shinui, like it is Nishtalshlus. Okay. So that's what this pasuk comes to add. Total union. Oh, would I have loved to see how the Rebbe Rashab would have unpacked this. That would be something. Okay, well. Are there any other questions? If not, let's read at least a few more lines in the next paragraph. Continue on. I'm actually glad I read this thing in Chukas. Very, very helpful. This very helpful. So keep that in mind, because you could say this Chukas Sicha explains this maimer, what means Atei mitzvahs nitfas mamish, and what will be la'asid lave. Yesh hanivra yesh amiti. Says yesh hanivra yesh amiti in existence. There's yesh hanivra yesh amiti in the neshamas Yisrael begufim, and yesh hanivra yesh amiti the neshamas Yisrael begufim la'asid lave, when it'll all be revealed. Whereas today it's concealed. Yet another level. Okay. Good. So let's read on. New paragraph, page 386. Definitely need to take a pause here, because I think what we just learned, which is really drives the point home, is now going to explain finally, the long-awaited and anticipated question, what about the animal soul? How does this help us? This Shema Yisrael, Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya Echad, help us achieve V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha. I can't help but think the Frierdiker Rebbe would say Shema Yisrael, Rosh Hashanah for sure, and other times for a long time. I remember also another Rebbe. He lived on Brooklyn and Brown. It was the Skulena Rebbe. Remember him? Anybody? Shleima. So the Skulena Rebbe used to come sometimes to Fabring. He was a very holy Jew. He actually had like a face that was literally like glowed. It was a transparent face, like light. And I once went Friday night to his shul. We couldn't, I don't know, for whatever reason, it was late or it was raining, I don't remember now. So I lived on Montgomery and New York. His shul was on Crown End and Brooklyn. And I had heard this, but I never saw it. And I came there, and he says Shema Friday night in davening, an hour and a half probably. I mean, they waited 1 hour and a half. So, learning this from the Mittler Rebbe, you get a sense, what is it that these great Jews were thinking when they said Shema? So basically, we've already been reading, I don't know how many pages and how many weeks and weeks and weeks have we been learning Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and we haven't even gotten to V'ahavta. So I'm just thinking, Hamayrik Be'echad, this elaboration, this elongation and elongated elaboration on Echad, all before we even get to now. So how this is going to affect now the Ava, that will also impact the animal soul. So you can imagine an hour and a half is not a lot of time, relatively speaking, if you're taking this journey. Whether we can say Shema in this manner, we'll wait and see. But I just wanted to point that out.
He came to the Rebbe's Farbrengen and also to some Samiti.
Yeah, I remember. The Hilikerid, I remember that. I saw him. You could see he was a different caliber. So let's just begin the next paragraph, just to get our feet wet, and we will. So he says now, V'hine metam zeh. New paragraph 386. The pages are at ayinbeis.com. For this reason, now, for the metam zeh, due to this reason that we just explained, Kusha Omer Acha Shema Yisrael, is what we say after Shema Yisrael. We say, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha as Hashem b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha. To love God with all our heart, with b'shnei yitzarecha, with both sides of the heart. The Yetzer Tov, the Yetzer Hara, the right side of the heart, the left side of the heart. As he mentioned, Havaya Lekenu, the previous page, he said, means b'levavcha, that it's internalized all the way into our depths of our hearts. Tahainu, says the Mittler Rebbe, what does this mean? After we've established, or after we've reached a place that with the power of understanding of Bina within the mind, and the effect it had with Liba, because you see Bina Liba is an expression in Tikkun Ezer. So the comprehension with our minds and Bina Liba, and our effects also Bina the heart, because the Chol Avavcha, B'neshama Lekis Senikri Yisrael, and who's recognizing, who's understanding this in their mind and in their heart? Bina is the neshama, the divine soul, which is called Shema Yisrael, lahakir, to recognize, ulahavin calls there, and to understand all this, all that we've learned, which is ba'mitis achdus pshuta, the true seamless unity that connects everything as one unit, ba'atzmis elokus, in the core of elokus, gam achere ishtalshlus, also after, meaning within and after ishtalshlus, the ein shina lefon of klal kanal, because from Atzmus' point of view, there's no shina at all, from the highest levels of the divine to how the divine manifests within existence. So after Yisrael has reached, and I'll just sum again, in the Koyach HaSaga of Bina Shebemecha V'Liba, to recognize the Hakir, to discern, to recognize, to resonate, the Hakir to recognize. And to understand all this, and he continues in the parentheses, Vahu, and this that we just said, Lefi, Shavaya Lekenu Mamish. Summing up what we learned. Why? Because Havaya and Lekenu are Mamish one. B'chinas Pnimius ve'Atzmus Mamish. One in the inner and core, literally. She'ein kol helam u'mosach master canal. There is no concealment and partition that covers up at all, as we discussed. Ve'ein sorech lemtzoi hanal kalal. And you don't need that interface, that intermediary we spoke about in the ayin as an intermediary. It's all one seamless whole. So after this has been achieved in Shema Yisrael, remember Shema Havana. That's why he says Bina, Havana, understanding. V'im kain, mizeh tam atzmei. Going back to the words, tam zeh. This very reason, Yuchalias is the cause that can allow Sheyove Gile Er Asagazu, that this revelatory light of uncomprehension should come benefesh alekis in the divine soul mitzat shorshav iskasusha b'shem avaya b'teir mitzvahs canal. So this has, what has it done? It's infused, it's revealed, it's, you could even say, drawn out from the divine soul, the connection that it has in its root, its bond to Shema Havaya, the Shema Havaya of Elokeinu b'teir mitzvahs canal, like we learned before. That all this, sheyove gam b'seichel hanushi denefesh habamis. That this gili er hasogazu and the nefesh alekis that comes from the source shouldn't just remain the nefesh alekis. It should also yove gam b'seichel hanushi denefesh habamis hativis. It should also permeate in the human intelligence of the animal soul, the natural human intelligence of the animal soul. Afal pi shativa beheper gomor. Even though the nature of the animal soul, like we learned at length earlier, is that the diametric opposite. It's self-interest, its own survival, its own needs. Lahasi kol geshem v'nifred canal. The animal soul on its own is busy with trying to understand every geshem v'nifred. It's all about understanding materialism and that which is separate from God. But kol mokim, nevertheless, that's on its own. But through this avodah of Shema Yisrael, the nefesh alekis, the eir hasoga lekis zu, through this eir hasoga, this comprehension, this light, this revelatory comprehension, divine comprehension, it's so through that liyese bo m'mayla min ishtalshlos legamri, being that it's coming not from existence, it's coming from completely beyond ishtalshlos legamri canal, like we learned earlier. Ozay gam cheshech hagas hativi, because it's coming from such a powerful place beyond all of existence. That's why also the thick, coarse, and crass darkness, natural darkness, the nefesh habamis of the animal soul, shuseichel anushi, the leiv basar, which is human intelligence and a heart of flesh, hativi, natural, a heart of natural flesh, yaskim gamhu v'yedal emes, that the animal soul should also agree and should acknowledge the truth. So all this is causing the nefesh habamis to acknowledge and accept this deeper truth, even though in its own nature it goes the opposite direction against God. Let's already read till as much as I can read here, because we see Shema Oris Eir Ha'emes Hazeh, that from the reflection of this light of truth, b'nefesh halikis, b'seichel v'das haliki, with the intelligence and the discernment or understanding, perception, divine perception, yutfezel emes gomer. This should be understood and appreciated as absolute truth, as the absolute truth. Gam b'seichel anushi, also in the seichel anushi can appreciate it that way. Sheyechayev amitis hadover hazeh, that the mind, the human mind of the animal soul should also understand and compel it to accept this truth. In other words, the argument is so persuasive that when you really understand it, even though it's coming from the divine soul and everything we've learned, it has the power to persuade the animal soul, obviously being an intelligent creature. The pasuk says, "Emes yere darke." Emes shows the way. It's like darkness is the absence of light, but when you shine the light, it's impossible to deny. In other words, the animal soul can thrive in ignorance when it doesn't know. So then it follows its own desires. But should you make the case, like we've done here, with Shema Yisrael, Havai Elokeinu, Havai Echad, Emes yere darke, u'kamay shekosav gam cheshech layachshich mimcha. Like it says, even darkness cannot conceal you, or does not create concealment from you. Because once you shine light, darkness cannot conceal the light. Now, the truth is, to really understand this, we need to read more, but time is running late here. In the next parentheses, he's going to explain even more why it affects the animal soul this way. It's not just the truth that's persuasive, but he's going to say, because the koyach hapoel benifel, because the divine energy actually enters into existence. Remember, even though by Atzmus das Tachton and das Elyon are one, but it is das Tachton. It is a level of elikus that goes into existence. So he's going to explain, since it goes into existence, existence includes the animal soul. You know what? Let me just read. I'll read it already. Let me read it quickly. V'hu metamanal. So he adds in a parenthesis, so clearly it's like an additional explanation. And the reason for this is that it's persuading the animal soul, though its nature is the opposite. Because we learned that the Eir, even when it enters existence, it never becomes one with existence. Even as it enters Shtalshus Koyach HaPoel Benifel, even as it manifests within existence, it always remains removed. Remember, nitfis and not nitfis. So that was not just to explain because God is so great. It comes to show us that in existence you can experience the godliness beyond existence. Elohuma ayin mamish liyesh be'ein shinei klal, like we learned at length. And this now explains why it was so important to emphasize this. It's mamish yeshmayin, a paradigm shift without any shinui at all. Remember, it's infinitely distant and didn't create any shinui in the core. Kamoy kaidem shenivre'elam. It's exactly equal to the way before it was creation. Al-Kain says, since the divine beyond is now experienced through the divine within existence, Al-Kain yipel b'chinas bitl mitzias. That's why the level of bitl mitzias, the higher level of bitl, well, yipel means it will, yipel means to fall, but it means here to enter. It will attract attention. Vasoga emes belakus av betzimsum ha'achlin de noiga. It will permeate and affect this appreciation of the truth of godliness, even through the tzimsum, even through the last tzimsum, the lowest tzimsum of noiga, of klipas noiga, sheheim behester elakus betachlis. That they are totally concealed godliness. In the human intelligence and in natural emotions of the animal soul, obviously. So all this because if the divine within existence would have been subject to concealment and would be a shinui, then you could say that existence can never experience bittul mitzias. But since the divine within existence, that's giving life to existence, always remains removed, that tells us that it gives us the power that in the very system we have that which is beyond the system, that allows that even the darkest dark of the animal soul, you can affect this, it could understand this truth. And a proof to this, even the nations of the world that are not appreciate necessarily these highest levels, called Alakad Alakai, the God of all gods. Uksiv Mila Yerecha Melech HaGoyim, Uksiv Halus Hashem Kol Goyim Ukahai Gavna. In other words, even the nations of the world, which represents the material world. They also appreciate, how could they appreciate godliness? You could say they're trapped in the darkness of this world, because the godliness that sustains them in existence is really beyond existence. In other words, embedded in the DNA of the program of existence is the divine energy that's beyond existence. I'm going to read till the end of the paragraph already. And this is what it says. V'yadaita hayom. He's going back to V'yadaita. That you shall know today. Ki havayu elikim b'shamayim emal b'yichudei elah, which is how he explains it in Ayin Beis in volume 2. Havayu elikim b'yichudei elah b'shamayim emal, referring to the higher yichud. V'ala oretz mitochas. And also Shemayim emal v'aretz mitochas, the earth below. B'klipas nega. So havayu elikim, both in the highest level, yichudei elah, and also on the earth, in the lowest levels of Klipa, Einaid, which is that the Hainu B'Shneim, Einaid B'Shova Metamanal. In both levels, Shemayim and Oretz. Also on earth, down below, the way the divine manifests in existence, it's all Einaid, all equal. Al Kain Kamei Kechashech Keda. That's why before him, darkness is like light. So the darkness is not going to conceal anything. V'gam Cheshach Layachshech, like he said before. And also the cheshach will not darken. So cheshach can darken a state that relates to darkness, like a light that's commensurate to darkness, but not Atzmus, which is beyond, even while it's within existence. And this adds explanation. This is the reason that the Nefesh Abamis is persuaded by the truth of the Nefesh Alakis, because the divine that's beyond exists within the divine that's within existence, even in the darkness, even the lowest darkness. Okay, I know I read a lot, this whole paragraph, but I didn't want to leave it hanging. It just felt important to, This I will stop here, the end of the paragraph on top of 387. So we finally got back to Nefesh Abamis. And you can understand now why it's so important to understand that how existence itself is one with the divine, and all that we've learned, all the different levels here. Okay. Any questions?
There are a number of questions. One that has been jumping out at me the whole class, almost the whole class, is whether, because of everything we read today, are there really two ayins, or there's really just one ayin? And in reality, there's no ayin at all. But it seems like at a minimum, there's only one ayin.
Is there existence? Why don't you ask a better question? Is there existence?
Well, there is, I think.
If there's existence, then there's ayins. So,
one or two.
Al-Rebbe Rashab made it very clear there's two. Because as soon as there's existence, that makes two levels of ayin. There's the ayin beyond existence and the ayin that relates to existence. So that's what he said in Ayin Beis. He explained it. He asked this question himself.
I know. That's why I'm asking it again. Because...
So I'm saying, if there's existence, if you said you have a problem with the question whether there's existence because it's all godliness is one thing. But if there's existence, there's two levels of ayin. There's a tzimtzum, there's a kav, there's a whole seder shtalshus. These Maimorim did not come to negate the process of creation. It's the process of creation still stands. It's coming to introduce that we, Shema Yisrael, can introduce deeper levels of yichud in understanding creation.
Very nice.
As a matter of fact, the second level of ayin is what allows the creation to happen. It allows the animal soul to exist. And at the same time, since it's one and united with a higher level of ayin, tzad Atzmus, that's why it allows it to appreciate this yichud, even while it also first begins as a selfish animal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, plenty to unpack. I'm not suggesting it's over with. Just read it. Plenty to think through. I'm going to stop here. End of the paragraph. Any other questions? At least initial ones. We will go over this all. Don't worry. I'm not leaving you hanging here. A few more pages also still on this topic. He's not finished either, which is also good. And this is what we have. Look, I wish the Ayin Beis would have continued and would have elaborated on all this. I'm sure would have added. But as I said, we were not left bereft. Okay. So we'll stop here. I'm stopping the recording.